I'm joined by Labour commentator and former Labour List editor Peter Edwards. Peter, you saw that piece. What did you make of it?
Well, I think Keir Starmer is saying absolutely the right thing, because you can't do anything at all unless you're in government. But clearly, after a bit of a difficult week for the Labour Party around picket lines, he's trying to square the circle in these two different tensions he alluded to. One is that it's completely reasonable and understandable people like Sam Tarry, in the middle of a cost of living crisis, to go and talk to trade unionists who are on strike. They've had real terms pay cut. Yet at the same time, you need policy set by the leadership and the wider party, not by one person on a picket. So trying to reconcile those two things is quite difficult. But I think Keir Starmer, however awkward it might have been this week, is doing the right thing, because he's trying to speak to public concerns rather than purely Labour Party concerns, and ensure that he doesn't go away with some other very good and moral and decent leaders who articulate and mobilise hundreds of thousands of members, but still lost the general election.
He's been accused, hasn't he, in relation to Sam Tarry, of scoring an own goal. And I absolutely appreciate the Twitter sphere is certainly not public opinion as a whole. But it's quite interesting, because earlier this week I was pointing out that Sam Tarry had not been sacked for for supporting strike action. He'd in fact been sacked for defying a ban on Shadow front benches going and standing on a picket line. And when I made that clear, Peter, I was fairly roundly attacked by quite a few Labour Party supporters who were saying you're splitting hairs, that actually Labour has forgotten its roots, that it was founded on trade unionism, and that actually in the midst of a cost of living crisis, Keir Starmer has absolutely scored an own goal. What do you think of that?
I don't think it's an own goal, but he is an incredibly difficult position. But, Sam Tarry was sacked, as Keir Starmer said, quote unquote, for making up policy on the hoof. But history is going to forget that, I'm afraid. History will remember a picture of Sam Tarry on the picket line outside Euston Station and the fact he was sacked within hours. Now, I think what Sam Tarry did was kind of understandable. He used to work for the TSSA, that's a railway union. Their office was at Euston until fairly recently. So, of course, he sympathises with railway men and women going on strike. But I think that everything for Keir Starmer, especially as a Labour leader of the opposition, comes back to who you're speaking to. Now, take me. I've been a Labour member for 20 years. I've been a trade union for nearly 20 years. But I still want my leader, Keir Starmer, to talk to the wider public. And his job is not to agree with me. His job, ultimately, and this might sound a bit strange, is to speak to Tory voters as well as Labour voters, because you need some Tory voters and some undecideds, or you will never get into power. And I think it is absolutely a tricky balancing act. But
isn't the problem here, Peter, that he's running the risk of alienating Labour Party members? Because this is the argument against Keir Starmer's leadership goes something like this. Remainers feel as though they are being betrayed by him, because he has said he is not returning Britain to the EU because he doesn't want to go back and open old wounds. You then got those on the left of the party who are saying he's moved away from trade union roots, or that's what appears to be happening, and they therefore feel dissatisfied. There are others in the middle who will say, well, actually, he also needs to appeal, as you've just argued, to Tory voters and the Red Wallers who left Labour and delivered this 80-seat majority to Boris Johnson, however extraordinary that was. But actually, by doing that, he's creating so much division within his base that there's a danger that the party effectively falls apart in disarray.
Well, there's always a danger of that when you're opposition, because you're always going to have people offering you unsolicited advice and you can't take it.
But you say that, but come on, this is really quite extraordinary, isn't it? He's managing to alienate Remainers within Labour. There's then the Red Wall, in the hope of winning over the Red Wall, and then at the same time he's alienating the left of the party. I mean, that is a challenge for him, isn't it?
Of course, the Labour Party internally has had a bit of a row this week. I'll be the first to admit that. But actually, I think the bigger point was the other one you made, which is over 10 years, Labour has lost some of its core vote. And that's actually, although I like them a lot, a bit of that goes back to Ed Miliband, where there are concerns over welfare, immigration, deficit. People aren't talking about the deficit as much now. Clearly, a lot of the Labour core vote was lost under Jeremy Corbyn because of the leadership and what was seen as dishonouring the Brexit vote. So Keir Starmer is trying to right the ship after that, and that is going to take time. I don't think things have suddenly exploded on Keir Starmer's watch. I think he's done a very good job to kind of reconcile these tensions of what's going on in the party with the country, but that's right in the middle of a cost of living crisis, and I think there will be more tough times for Labour ahead. But Keir Starmer, to be Prime Minister, and I think he can, has to complete this balancing act of essentially keeping Labour's members on side, ensuring that we don't spend all our time talking about Brexit, because that is settled for now, and then coming out with some decent policies, how to make us all feel a bit less poor. Because I do believe the Sam Terry story this week was a big one. I wouldn't deny that for a moment. But I do believe the next election will be decided on whoever the Tory leader is, leadership plus the economy.
Agreed. Labour commentator and former Labour List editor Peter Edwards, thank you very much.